Hi, everyone. Welcome to Finn. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today. This is Mr. Eli Bravo, and Eli is an internationally renowned journalist, a mindfulness teacher, and breathwork facilitator. And he's currently completing his master's in psychology with a concentration in marriage and family therapy at Albizu University, Miami campus. He was born in Caracas, Venezuela, where he graduated in journalism at the University Católica Andrés Bello in 1990, and he moved to the United States in 1997. And for decades, he worked as an on-camera host and producer for an array of networks, including Discovery Channel, the BBC, Union Radio, and others, while privately sustaining his meditation practice. In 2016, Eli completed a one-year certification at the Mindful Awareness Research Center at UCLA and moved into the intersection of mindfulness and psychology. He recently completed a one-year training on contemplative psychotherapy at the Nalanda Institute in New York City, and has attended retreats and programs at the Center for Mindful Self-Compassion, Spirit Rock, Insight Meditation Society, and the Omega Institute. He is currently Director of Mindfulness Programs at Ulera Institute in Miami, and that is spelled U-L-E-R-U, Institute in Miami. For more information, he can be reached at www.elibravo.com, and it's with my pleasure to welcome you this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Barron, and thanks a lot for everyone for coming. It's a pleasure, it's an honor to be here at Finn, and it's also kind of I would say a surprise for me as a student, having the opportunity to talk to therapists and professionals. It's a challenge. I have to say that even though I have been in camera many times and I have delivered my talks to big audiences, I feel a little nervous. So being mindfulness of the way I feel, I will start by keeping track of my breath and feeling my feet on the ground. So I say, okay, here I am. And thanks for the introduction, because it highlights that this is my second career now that I'm becoming a counselor. And psychology has been always an interest to me. And since I moved my private practice of meditation into the forefront of my career, I have found a great resource in meditation and in mindfulness as a way to help people and also to help myself. So today I will take some time to talk about Buddhist psychology and how it relates to systemic theory or system theory, because it's, as you will see, is very close related. We're talking about a way of thinking about a process, not just explaining a situation. And I will, of course, answer any questions that you might have. It will be my pleasure. I know there's a chat room where you can leave any question. I will stop 2 or 3 times along my talk to open up for questions. And then, of course, we can chat at the end. And we will have the opportunity to address any common questions that we have, because at the end it's not something that's happening just one way. I would love to have it, as a town hall, as it is. No? So now I will start sharing my computer screen, and I will say that hopefully you will see my screen now. How it is, can you see it? So now I need to just be able to move. Hold on, I'm gonna stop for a second. I can see my cursor. I know it's moving around, but I cannot see it right now. Okay, let's see here. Okay, I was able to stop here. Perfect. So I will move again because I think I need first to close the view that I have here. Let me see. and then I can start sharing. Hmm. Okay, for some reason I'm not able to close it, but I'm gonna try again. Okay.
Yeah, so Eli, we do see your PowerPoint.
Okay, perfect then. Okay, so I'll talk about Buddhist psychology and family systems and how East meets West on interdependence and this idea of how things are connected, which is a cornerstone on system thinking, but it is also on Buddhist psychology and the way reality can be explained, not just reality on the outside world, but also on the inner world. So during this presentation, well, you will be able to learn core principles of Buddhist psychology, which are important, how the concept of karma connects with system thinking, also the wheel of dependent origination and how it relates to the systemic approach, and the link between the interdependence and connectedness. And we will talk about how mindfulness can help to detect patterns of reactivity. And since mindfulness is more a practice than theory, we will have the chance to do a brief mindfulness practice. And well, the first question I think is valid is to ask if there's a Buddhist psychology, I mean, such as a Buddhist psychology of the mind. And I would say yes, and it aims at the possibility of inner freedom and well-being by paying attention to the mind-body interaction. So it's basically a path of inner knowledge. Here you'll see a beautiful image. This is called the Medicine Buddha on the Tibetan tradition. And here the Medicine Buddha, there are many Buddhas in the way Tibetans think and they see their practice. And this one has a blue skin, is related to Shiva in the tradition of Hinduism. This Buddha has in his hand a potion that can be healing for the mind and the heart, also some herbs, and it's seated in a meditative position. Along this presentation, I will use some words that come from Pali, the ancient language from India, or it can come from other traditions. And my first invitation is to see these terms, this cosmogony, this way of thinking, as something that comes from ancient times. So it's a symbology of a way of seeing what's happening in the world. So what I also will be sharing is what I learned on my certification at the Nalanda Institute in New York. Nalanda was a university in Bihar, India, and it was one of the main centers of study in the ancient world. It was there between the 5th and the 13th century, especially during the first couple of centuries. It was one of the most important centers for study in the ancient world. It's been said to be the second oldest university. The Nalanda Institute in New York took the name and the tradition from this place. And as you'll see on your left, there is the Nalanda logo, the one that was used at Nalanda University. And we can see the dendrites from our neurons because this practice, which is the practice of Buddhist psychology and mindfulness, is closely related to development of our brain, of our heart as a center of emotion. And if you want to expand it, you can also see it as a way of a spiritual practice. I would like to start with the core principles of Buddhist psychology. If we can assume or contemplate that there's something as a Buddhist psychology. Buddhism has its core teachings in what's called the Four Noble Truths. This is the traditional way of referring to these teachings, and if the word truth, it sounds like too rigid or too solid, I will say that this is probably one of the few things that in Buddhism people give as a truth, and that's something that's real. And as you have the experience with reality, you might come up with the realization that, well, it makes sense. It is the truth. Here we see on the right, Buddha sitting on the shade of the Bodhi tree. It's said, according to the tradition, that after spending a night sitting under the Bodhi tree, Buddha came to enlightenment. And the first lecture or talk that he gave to the few people following him was the Four Noble Truths. So he explained how he understood the causes of suffering. And the Four Noble Truths are as follows. The first one is that there is suffering in life. It's called dukkha. Here is where usually Buddhism can get a bad reputation, because it seems like it's all constantly talking about suffering in the world. It's all about suffering. It's not exactly like that. We can translate the word suffering or dukkha as dissatisfaction. So a way of saying it is that there's a dissatisfaction in life. Life can be painful. Life can have a situation that cause pain, physical or emotional pain, and there can be even existential pain. So there's a hint of suffering in life, and that's something that is there. The second noble truth says that the cause of suffering is not the events that happen by itself, but it's the craving, aversion, or delusion that the mind experiences as we are living our lives. And craving, aversion, and delusion are key concepts on the way our mind understand the world and how we feel and how we act with things around us. So if we think that there's suffering in life, and then we are either running away from the suffering, not paying attention to the suffering that might be there, or trying to pretend it's not, or even sometimes have a craving or those experiences that we consider good and we want more, well, there might be the root of suffering. That's what Buddha says. So then the third noble truth says that there is a way, it's possible to come to the cessation of suffering. There is what's usually in the tradition called the remedy. And the remedy itself is the fourth noble truth, which is that there's a path out of it, and that's the Dharma or the teachings or the Buddhist Eightfold Path. Again, if we see this as an ancient teaching and as a way of understanding the mind, well, we might be able to see Buddha sitting there on the right, not just as a historic figure or for some people a religious figure, but we might be able to see that probably it's kind of a psychotherapist sitting, legs crossed under a Bodhi tree, teaching his fellow Indians living in northern India where he was, teaching how the mind works and how we can reduce the suffering we're experiencing on a daily lives. Let's say, well, we try to decode these four noble truths. So now we have not Buddha, but we have on the right Matthew Ricard. He's, I mean, people say that he's the happiest man in the world, which is kind of a big name tag, but I mean, he's a very strong practitioner, and he has gone through a lot of different researches during the last couple of years, including having him meditating inside a CAT scan machine, which is like an unusual place to meditate, basically to understand what happens inside his head and his brain and his nervous system as he's meditating. So the Four Noble Truths, we can understand it in a more contemporary way, thinking as suffering, meaning that all things come from causes. Everything that's happening comes from somewhere. There is a reason things are happening right now. And the origin of this suffering can be just cause and effect. There is something that happened, it has an effect. And that's part of the human condition, because we live in this web of causes and effects. The cessation is the possibility, the third noble truth, to stop the wheel of interdependent origination. I will talk about that in just a second, but let's think by now that it's a way of stopping this constant cause and effect that's spinning around and we are trapped inside of it. And the path is the cultivation of the qualities of mind and heart that will lead to liberation. In the Buddhist tradition, is called the nirvana. Has a beautiful name. It can even make you think about a rock band. And we can basically think about nirvana as a state of freedom. Freedom from the ailments of the mind and also of the body. Here is the Eightfold Path. And if we see, it's, eight ways of living, which includes the right view and is the clarity of mind to see things as they are, right intentions, which means where our intentions and the way we are come from, right speech is not just talking, but also listening in a wise way, right action, which is directly related to behavior, right livelihood, which is related to our moral principles and the way we manage ourselves in the world. Right effort is how we concentrate our actions, and the right concentrations is related to the way we are able to focus our attention and work with our minds. And the right mindfulness is the possibility to be in the here and now. Each one has a relationship with the other. When you develop one part, the rest of the Eightfold Path is also strengthened. So here we see a circle, a wheel, which is a key shape and a way of seeing how we walk and we live in the world. And this is very closely related to systemic thinking, as we will see later on. Before we move forward, I want to just make a clear clarification about karma, because it's also into this idea of how we experience reality and how we can be trapped in the wheel of dependent origination. Karma is natural causality that develops through lifetime. It's something that, let's say, we build as we live. It's also an invitation to see the causes of suffering. So it's a way to see that what's happening now has roots in the past, but it's not just about us or related to us as an individual, but as us as a family, us as a culture, us as a civilization. Also, karma is not bad luck, which is sometimes a common way of understanding it. Actually, is the interplay of causes and conditions arising moment to moment. And it brings the idea that nothing happens in isolation, that the parts are connected, a key component of system thinking, and for every action there is a reaction. This is one of the first concepts that I got in my class at Albizu University when we were studying what is system thinking. So no part is there by itself. So here is the wheel of dependent origination. It's also called the wheel of life. And this is a tapestry that comes from Kathmandu, Nepal. And as you see, and it's the Tibetan tradition, it's rich in shapes, a lot of symbols. It's very dense. It's also beautiful and elegant. And this wheel explains how the mind works and how we relate to reality. But since it's so complex and it has so many different aspects, I'd like to share a simplified wheel that can bring us to this systemic thinking and see how, let's say, causes and effect are constantly at interplay. It's a very rich and a very complex interaction of different elements, and it includes, of course, some of the Pali or the traditional words. Some of them you might have heard them before, like sankharas or karmic interaction. But instead of going that path, let's just try to think of this in a more contemporary way of things happening all the time to us. No? So here you will see on the upper right, on the 1 and 2 areas or quadrants, you'll see the causes that can be in the past of any situation we are going through. In Buddhist psychology, it's not like the past is not just understood of what happened to us last week or a month ago, but also what happened when we were kids, you know, in the early childhood, or even what happens on previous lives. This is one of the most controversial concepts of Buddhism, and I have to say that also I have a hard time trying to grasp this idea. But system thinking, and even in family therapy, we can think about genograms. We can think about intergenerational patterns. Let's say that this is where what happened before us and with our ancestry comes into play. So that's like a cause that's rooted with us, it's there. And it comes into play when we are experiencing any event. Then from quadrant 3 up until the 7, there is where our way of understanding ourselves, the preconceptions that we have, the biases, the distorted perceptions come into play. Like there's an event that's happening, but we have, let's call it a lot of baggage, which this baggage is somehow an effect from the previous causes. And then between 7 and 8 is where we usually come into action. So that's where we react in the way that's probably a habit, not necessarily a healthy habit, but there's where the pattern comes into play. And that's when it happens and we can see it. And then it moves to 11 and 12, which is the imprint that lives in ourselves and others. And in the tradition of the Buddhist psychology, somehow where karma comes and the traumatic experience, because then it will load, it will charge the will again. So it's like you can be spinning, repeating these patterns. You can think with this way of relationship in a couple, it's happening, how substance abuse or addiction is happening, or how we're basically reacting to a daily event. The arrow that shows there the freedom, and we will talk about this later, is that points out of one of the ways of getting out of this wheel of dependent origination, and it's the capacity that we can develop to move from reaction into response, to move from the stressful reaction or traumatic reaction into a more compassionate and conscious response to events. So that's why I wrote here the immediate goal when we go through the wheel of dependent origination is to stop reactivity, which can be a very liberating experience. It can be a goal of psychotherapy. The midterm goal is seeing the wheel at play, gaining insight of how it's constantly happening, moment to moment, sometimes being really fast. A lifetime goal can be to slow down the turning, and in the tradition of Buddhist psychology, the spiritual goal is to basically stop the cycle. The tradition says that nirvana is attained when you're able to stop this turning, and there is no more karma on people's life, and that's what nirvana is. So this is clearly, I see something that is closely related to systemic thinking. This is a diagram that we see in class, and is a way of thinking differently, moving from straight lines into loop structure. So something happened not just because it's there, there are root causes. They're not individual nodes. They are emerging from particular feedback loops. This is the same wheel shape, turning and turning. In the Western tradition, and even in Western psychotherapy, beginning, the straight line was the way of thinking, and sometimes in some of the frameworks or the theoretical models, they can be really concentrated on a straight line when there is an event, there is a behavior, and there is then a consequence, or the model of ABC. So let's see if we can get this wheel of dependent origination like more understandable. This is another wheel moving from suffering to freedom. And again, I'm using some Buddhist term, but we can use this term to relate with clients in a way that these cycles can make sense. Recently, I was training one of my clients, and when I showed him this, he said, wow, it's now so clear. Why am I having so much trouble when I'm having these conversations with my wife, or I'm having such a hard time being here at home during the lockdown? So the cycle of suffering, which is on the top right, says how misperceptions create afflictive reaction, always loaded with emotion, can come to a compulsive action, and then they can lead to a traumatic life, which can be habits that are unhealthy. They are reinforcing trauma, and that will then charge a misperception that then brings the afflictive reaction, and that wheel keeps on turning. As you will see, two of the common terms used in Buddhist psychology, karma and samskara, are there. But it's possible to move from a cycle of suffering into a cycle of freedom. So there is possible to see that the wisdom that can be developed through therapy, through inner work, through insight, can be sustained by meditation and awareness, which will lead to a lifestyle that is ethical, that it moves to right action and right way of treating ourselves and others. And that brings more consciousness to our life. So that's a conscious life. That can be nirvana. It's a way that I would say is very down to earth to understand what nirvana is. Out of the tradition of Buddhism, we can think of nirvana of a way of being happy with the life we're having and not trapped in a cycle of suffering. And that will bring more wisdom, and then the wheel keeps on turning. As you will see in the cycle of freedom, there is a little gap, which is down there on the right. And that's the gap where recognition and choice comes into play, when we're able to be aware of these cycles, these patterns, and we're able to take a different pathway, a different way of dealing with the daily situations, and that will bring a more ethic lifestyle. Let's call it a healthier lifestyle. So these are the wheels at play, and before I move on, I don't know if there's any questions so far, any comments. Am I going too fast? Does it make any sense? I'd love to hear.
I think you're doing fine, sir. I think you're doing just fine.
Oh, thank you very much. Thanks. Okay, so this system thinking, this way of things one connected to the other, can be even simplified in a different way. David Kessler was one of our teachers on the contemplative psychotherapy program at Nalanda. He works with the Ackerman Institute in New York, and he's a social worker. And he explained this with probably words that we can relate to. Contact, as the moment that we get in contact through our senses to any situation, that will bring in a feeling tone. That experience, stimulus, bring a feeling tone that can be aversion, clinging, or ignorance, and that's pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral tones. And that feeling tone can lead to a perception, a way even to understand what's happening. That will trigger then, again, the part of trying to move away from it, to get closer to it, or ignore it. Somehow can be also related to the freeze, flee, or fight response. And then the clinging can become grasping when this gets turbocharged and it becomes so intense, and it leads to an action that can be a wise or unwise action. Let's call it healthy or unhealthy, functional or dysfunctional. And the action will have an imprint. It can be called a karmatic imprint that will then be there as a filter, as an emotional internal charge for the next contact. and then the wheel starts spinning again. How can we understand this with a simple example? Well, he gives us the garbage can example. So David Kessler says, imagine that there's a man who, after a long day of work, he comes to his house, and he was supposed to take out the trash, but since it's so late, he gets there close to midnight, and he sees that the garbage can is still inside. So there's just basically a garbage can late at night, and then the feeling tone that arises can be unpleasant. It's unpleasant to see that there. He doesn't like it. He might feel certain contraction. He might feel like, I don't know, his heart beating fast. And there is the perception that this is an unfair situation. He might even get trapped in the idea this is something that's happening to him specifically, and it's against him. The clinging comes in when there is a clear aversion to the trash can and everything that's involved. Then anger comes in where this clinging becomes grasping. The anger hits up the situation. The action is to wake up his wife at midnight, probably very angry. Why is this there? And the fabrication and the karmatic imprint is that probably a conflict that is already happening with the couple, it's sustained. So that that imprint will be present on the next contact this man or this couple could have. This is a very simple way of seeing it at play, but it's also a way of seeing ourselves and even explaining how there's a connection with situations as they're happening, as they are arising, as they are moving along, sometimes so fast, sometimes many times during the day. This can be even a good way to explain to a client how actions have reactions. And those reactions can have many different levels. So what does this mean for marriage and family therapy? And this is where, as a student, my interest has been placed. Well, first, that we can use this framework or this way of understanding our daily interactions as a way to slow down the cycle of reactivity. Also to deconstruct the situation, to really see what's happening, what's at play. What's at play with each one of the members? How even one member, by bringing change, can also have an effect, a positive effect or beneficial effect on the rest of the system. Also, it can help to build resilience if resilience is understood as a way of pull out of reactivity. If I'm not as reactive as I used to be with things that are happening in my system, I might be able to overcome or rebound after a difficult situation, and I can help the rest of my system or my family. And also it can give us the idea that we're connected to multiple causes and conditions, that interdependence is part of relationships, not our immediate relationships, but also there's a sense of connection with everyone around us. If I will probably push it a little farther, Buddhist psychology somehow brings a question to each one of us if we're willing to go there and have the insight of who am I? I mean, who's the I, or even who's the ego? And it can help us to see that we are not our mental habits, our way of thinking, that we're not our body functions or our biological body. And it includes a concept that's the Buddha nature. And in Buddhist psychology, there's a lot of time devoted to understanding what we can explain as the radiant awareness that's experiencing reality. This might sound like too vague and it can be hard to grasp, but let's say is the capacity to feel the one who knows. And I'm using here an expression that I heard from my teacher, Jack Cornfield. The one who knows is the one who's aware, who can see the will at play, who's able to see and experience what's happening, who is not caught up in the daily situation, but has a bigger perspective. And the therapist can connect with the clients and that radiant self to promote change. And here, this tradition is closely related to the humanistic model, or this strong connection of the therapist and the client to work in a collaborative way to try to talk and work, let's say, with the healthiest self of the person, and be able to bring that strength into therapy, into the alliance, but also then the client can use this on his or her daily life. So now I would like to talk a little bit about meditation, and here I will just stop for a minute. We have like 10 more minutes to go, and see if there's any questions so far or any comments. Okay, I think we're good. So let's move on. I like to bring this quote from Mark Epstein. His book, Advice Not Given, is an amazing book of psychotherapy and psychoanalysis and meditation. And he says, the point of meditation is to bring its lessons to everyday life, to be able to live more fully in the moment, to stop undermining myself, to be less afraid of myself and others, to be less at the mercy of my impulses, and to give more generously in the midst of a busy and demanding day. In my years of work as a psychiatrist, I have come to see that these can be goals of psychotherapy. And it's, I think, a beautiful way to see how meditation practice, which seems to be something you do for yourself, actually is something that has a positive impact in others and in the ways that we move along our lives. Meditation is closely related to mindfulness. And what is mindfulness? Well, it's a mental training. When we do mindfulness, we're training our minds to see more clearly. And we can see the wheel of dependent origination, or we can see the patterns, or we can see reality as it is with more compassion and space. So it's like moving from a mind full of thoughts, sometimes thoughts that can be very painful, to be mindful, to be completely in the moment, with the good and bad, this and that, and with all experiences hold in awareness and also in compassion. Also, mindfulness is the possibility to open a space to choose. So if we remember that gateway out of the wheel of interdependent origination, when there's a stimulus, if we can be mindful, we can move from reaction into response. We can move to patterns, habits, which are deeply ingrained in our minds and our behavior, and we can start to develop a response that is intentional and wise. This sounds like a great goal for any session or for therapy, to be able to bring more awareness to what's happening, how different causes and effects are at interplay, and where is the power that the client, that every one of us have to break those patterns and to bring something different that then will resonate with the rest of the system. So this is the basic of mindfulness, is to be able to pay attention to what's happening while it's happening, using John Kabat-Zinn definition, and then using our self and our Buddha nature, or our capacities, our noble capacities, to develop new responses to situations. So now that we're here and we have talked about mindfulness, I'm guessing if you are willing to do a brief mindfulness practice, a brief meditation, how about that? Sounds good? Okay. So I see some of you are sitting in a couch. I know some other of you are sitting on your chair, on your desk. I would invite you for the next probably 7 to 8 minutes, find a comfortable position as you're sitting, and don't try to do anything but breathe during the next couple of minutes. Find a comfortable position where you're sitting. And this comfortable position means that you are relaxed but alert at the same time, because we want to be awake and notice what's happening. And if you feel comfortable closing your eyes right now, you can do that. Softly closing your eyes, and let's inhale together through the nose and then exhale through the mouth, letting the air go out and extending that exhalation a little bit longer. Inhaling, there's a wheel of breathing, and then exhaling through the mouth, and make that exhalation longer to activate the central nervous system. Do it one more time at your own rhythm. And when you're ready, bring your breath to your nose and just follow the movement of your body as you breathe. So that way, when you inhale, you are aware, you know you're inhaling, but also you might feel it. It's a movement in your body. It could be the belly expanding or the chest rising. And then when you exhale, you know, you're aware, you're exhaling, but also there is some movement. Chest comes down, belly relaxes. And little by little, try to be more aware or connected with that sensation of your body breathing. Now I invite you to move kindly, softly your attention to feel your body resting on the chair or the couch or the bench, and feel the points of contact of your body. Being aware of your body sitting there, the weight, points of pressure, and also your body breathing in and out. Maybe you notice that your mind, as its natural, drift away, and I notice that you start thinking about things you have to do or you have done during the day. That's normal, and the practice is just to notice it and bring back your attention to rest on your body, sitting there, breathing in and out, just feeling the movement of your body. And it helps if you're able to find a part of your body where the breathing is more noticeable. You know, it can be like your belly going in and out, or the chest rising and falling. For some people, it's just the nostrils, where the air comes in and goes out. Following the breath and that cycle, in and out. When you inhale, you know you're inhaling and you feel it. And when you exhale, you notice you're exhaling and you feel it. And see if there's any sense of relaxation or openness. Or it can be also activated, uncomfortable. Wherever it is, just try to notice and rest on the breath. And again, you might notice that sounds can distract you, or thoughts or body sensations. You can notice them, then come back, bring your attention back to this sense of your body breathing. Little by little, bringing more clarity to your awareness. to see your system at work. Body, mind, emotions, the heart. Let's close this brief practice by inhaling deeply and filling the lungs with air, and then exhaling softly, long, slow, letting the air go out and letting go, letting go. Do it one more time if you feel you need it. And then when you're ready, you can open your eyes. So that was a brief practice, and also an opportunity to slow down that wheel turning in our heads. I have found facilitating mindfulness and teaching mindfulness that oftentimes people can start to feel like a sense of space. It's like, wow, it's like there's space for me in between thoughts and sensations, and it feels good. And here is where this awareness comes into play, because it will help to slow down situations, to slow down reactions. Then there's the possibility to gain some insight on the way different parts are at play constantly. And it's a very easily available resource. And that's the reason so many different practices or therapies now have mindfulness-based components. And it can be very beneficial, as research has shown. And today, what I wanted to offer during this presentation was somehow the background behind mindfulness and where it comes from. Mindfulness has become so popular that it's kind of an aim on itself, and it's good. That's very good. But there is a deeper tradition. There's a way of thinking, which is very systemic. It's an ancient way of thinking that we can bring into the 21st century using the main concepts. They don't need to be attached to the words that come from tradition, but the way of thinking, it's there. And also it can be very revealing. As clinicians, and you might have experience when a person or a client say, oh, now I can see like deeper, or I can see this at play. Well, the Buddhist psychology basically helps to bring into the forefront how mind, body, and spirit, if you want to call it like that, or the heart and emotions are there at play constantly. So that was my presentation, and I think we have some time to talk and for some questions, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ellie. So I don't have any questions in the chat, but I do welcome you to unmute and ask a question or make a comment. And I'm gonna start with the first one, which is that everything you were doing in the guided meditation sounds like exactly the stuff I do right before I start doing hypnosis. So I can see how they're very, very closely tied to hypnotic trance. And of course, anytime you access that, then you're also accessing solution focused and the miracle question and all the variations on that. So I can see that immediate connection. I'm wondering if anybody else has either a question or they're making connections between this content that Ellie has given us and your systemic ideas. Anyone else?
I definitely did. Wait, is my mute off? Okay.
Yeah, no, we hear you.
So I was just wondering, do people specifically ask for this therapy? Or have you had someone, this might be a better way to ask it, but have you had someone from the Buddhist faith come to you for counseling specifically for that? Or, well, I'll start with that one. I'll just start with that one.
Yeah, but it's wonderful. It's a good one. You know, I'm completing my master's program, and one of the questions that we as a student are asked is, okay, what's your model? I know how are you going to work? And I think that's a very powerful question, because it said, well, how do I want to see the process? And I do believe that you have to start somewhere and then you can integrate. I'm saying this because I see myself developing my career as someone who uses contemplative practices as a core component of my private practice and that's something that I talk about constantly when I talk about mindfulness. So people might come saying, you know, I want to meditate. I want to learn meditation. I'm so stressed. I want to help to relax. And I learned meditation on what is called secular mindfulness, which is not related to what we talk now. So I don't bring terms like Sankara or Nirvana or anything like that. But some of them are so common nowadays that I can tip into this or mention it. And if it makes any sense, we can develop the idea on a secular perspective. Okay. I do have some clients that have come to me asking about Buddhist psychology or what's the Buddhist take on this. And then we can go deeper into that. Oftentimes it's not there, but I've seen, and I'm sure this is something that I will be more familiar as I develop my career, my hours, that there's no necessity to bring on to the forefront the theoretical model or systemic thinking. It has more to do with you as a therapist, because that's the way you are seeing the situation with the individual, the couple, of the family. So it gives a framework. And something that I would like to say is that Buddhism can be seen, and that's the way I see it, as more a philosophy or a way of living your life than a faith or a religion. And this is also very important even when we're talking about mindfulness, because it's crucial for anyone to hold their beliefs, their faith, and feel that there is nothing threatening there. I mean, this is just another way of seeing things, and one is not in contradiction with the other.
So yes, so this is very akin to what MRI would talk about. Of all the MFT models, MRI is the one that sprang to mind, but then I am an MRI therapist, so that probably is why. But all the stuff about feedback cycles and things like that. And we've got Irma who's saying that this is very similar to systems theory readings about systemic ramifications, conscious purpose, which is what Bateson said, that conscious purpose is a bad thing. To go in there and try to push the river is a bad thing. Right. And so that would probably be in the same neighborhood as the second noble truth about craving, aversion, delusion, trying to make something happen that is outside of your control, right? That conscious purpose. And then Layla talks about radiant mind as a part of dialectic behavior. Reminds her of the wise mind. And Layla, what I thought on the same place is that radiant awareness reminds me of sparkling outcomes in narrative therapy.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. And also that when Ellie, we're talking about how we go through this cycle, and then we have this kind of imprint that becomes sort of a lens that then affects how we then look at the next contact. That made me think of dominant discourses from narrative. Yeah. Or Gottman's sentiment override.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. So I was making all kinds of connections to systemic models.
Yeah, and emotion focused therapy, slowing down the cycle, because that's all based on the cycle.
That stuck cycle that they get into, right, is big. So it may not be that the clients will meditate and slow down, but the therapist needs to do that so that they can ask questions that slowly unpacks. another narrative concept to, or do the frame by frame of that interactional cycle that they get stuck in.
Right, because that's what an EFT therapist does, is help them to deconstruct the negative cycle.
Right.
And we build the cycle so that they can, obviously through attachment and some other things, but basically to go from reacting to responding.
Well, and I'm thinking that certainly, of the Eightfold Path, the one that jumped out at me was right view, because that's about perception. And so we talk a lot in MFT about social constructionism and the idea that there are so many different ways that any one thing could be perceived, right? So this is not to say that there's one right view or one right action, right? But that you want to find that view or action or intention that works for you, that moves you in the direction that works, with the understanding that you have to work with the river, not push the river. So are we close, Ellie? Are we on the right track?
Beautiful, absolutely. And you know what? Even I don't like when the term right view or right mindfulness, and some people say wise view and wise action and wise mindfulness, because it opens up the space for discernment and to understand the intersubjectivity, because it's so important to understand, the interpersonal at play. So like Mark Epstein is one who writes about sometimes, because the tradition says the noble view. So that's like maybe too sacred. And the right is like, this is the right, there's the wrong, but the wise come from that insight. And it's true, Dr. Shirley, that there are many different models that have the same idea, because what I feel, and I say this humbly as a student, but I see that it's a way of understanding, and then you have different words to explain, and you can bring something that's different, but it's rooted on a basic understanding that it's not just a connection between what's happening to us and happening to others, but how this is a process that has a feedback, constant feedback. And that's why it's, I think, so powerful, because it also gives a door to get out of there. So,
that little gap
exactly.
in that cycle, sort of like you hit that gap and it might be able to go in the other direction or with that other cycle. I like it.
Yeah, that's why sometimes with the Four Noble Truths, they say, well, the first one is like the bad news, life is suffering. Then the second one is, well, this is the reason there's suffering. Then the third view is the hope. No, but there is something you can do about it. And the fourth is the remedy. So it's like, usually they say this is a doctor that gives you a diagnosis, but there is also hope, and this is what you can do. And that's why oftentimes, Buddha is referred as one of the first psychotherapists in the sense of trying to understand this. But again, I be honest, I usually don't talk about this Buddhist part as openly, and I try, and that's why Andrea's question was so good, because you don't want to like force a belief system into the client. But if the conversation opens up, it can be very interesting, and you find a lot of
Ellie, I can't help but think that no matter what you do, that these ideas are underneath what you do, right? And so Layla and I and Irma, we just talked about a number of different MFT models that would fit with these ideas. So I'm conscious of time right now, so I want to get you all onto your evening. But I invite people to say, what of these ideas are you taking that you would try in a systemic context? Right, and I'll start off by saying that I'm an MRI therapist, so I'm always tracking interactional cycles, and the intervention in that model is to do a 180-degree different thing at any point in the cycle, to do a 180-degree different thing. And what I like about the Eightfold Path, it now gives me 8 different versions of what's 180-degree different. I can view it 180 degree different. I can have a 180 degree different intention, speech, action, etc. So it gives me 8 ways now. Now, I'm not going to teach that to my clients, but I am going to talk about that there are lots of different ways they could be 180 degree different, and that's how they enter the gap and go in the other, get the pattern going in the other direction. So that's what I'm taking. Layla, what are you taking?
Oh my goodness, so much. I love that, how you can look at the 8. I hadn't even thought of that. So this is really interesting to me. And Ellie, I actually might email you, because I've done large periods of time working in the country of Bhutan and working with Buddha, in the Buddhist culture, with psychotherapy and the wheel of samsara that's so important to them. So I actually would love to have a further conversation with you
Oh, I love to.
about
Thank
this.
you.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great. Andrea, anything you're taking?
I definitely took pictures while we were going. And the first one, the dependent, what was it, origination diagram, as well as the eightfold path. One thing I know as a student that I still use is just the entire idea of overall well-being. All the time, which is has a path of its own. And I just loved how those correlated, and it was great. So I've already gone on all your websites and stuff, so I'll find everything. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Meredith, anything you're taking specifically from this?
Yeah, this fits really well with some of the work I'm doing. I love the garbage can piece. I thought, boy, that is really familiar, and that'll be useful. The idea of being reminded again about that gap and the open space to choose, I think is very important now because of the need for hopefulness. And I think that's life is going to happen, and what you do with that makes a huge amount of difference. You have a choice about how you will respond. So I think those are very useful, powerful ideas.
Okay. Sandra or Shay, would either of you like to ring in on what you're taking away from this? I assume you're still there. Hope Sandra is safely driving right now. Okay. While they're thinking and finding the mute button, Irma, is there anything that you're taking from this that stood out to you?
Well, first of all, Ellie, thank you so much for such a lovely presentation. I practice yoga, I practice Iyengar, and so once a month, our yoga teacher has, a meditation that I'm trying to do. And what's really nice is that it really helps you press the pause button. And one of the things that I love, and I'm going to quote Bowen because I have to, but Bowen says, don't do anything, just stand still. Just stand still and let the chaos just whirl around you. And then in terms of not fighting the river, I put a comment that the Dutch have learned to make peace with their North Sea, and they embrace it, and they have the windmills, and they're constantly, daily pumping the water out of their town, of their country. But they've learned to make peace with it. They're not fighting it. And so I think if we just take a step back and just embrace the inevitable, that I think we'll have a lot more mental health. At least I'm trying to do it.
Very good. Very good. All right. Well, Sandra,
But
Shay,
thank you.
I'm sorry. So Sandra, Shay, I'll give you another second there to respond if you like. If not, that's okay. I just want to thank everyone who attended and everyone who will get to see this video once we post it on our YouTube site. Our YouTube site, again, is the Florida Interest Network AAMFT, and also if you're in Florida, we invite, well, anywhere, but particularly Floridians, we invite you to join our Facebook page, which is also Florida Interest Network AAMFT. And we will be announcing in that Facebook site all of our upcoming trainings, which include all the licensure renewal for 2020. And of course, that will all go up on the website as well, or on the YouTube, so that even those of you who can't attend will be able to take them, get CEUs for it, all of that kind of good stuff. Shay says she couldn't hear you. She posted for us that we couldn't hear her, but you can see how it's related to narrative, yes. And the image that Andrea mentioned, that she had never seen these graphs before and would like to study more and see how she can incorporate it into her person and professional career. Isn't that lovely? Yeah, I'm sure that if you, well, Ellie, if one were to Google the what did you call it then, the dependent organization, what was it called again, that particular wheel?
The wheel of dependent origination. Yeah, there are many different ways of seeing it. I want to share, because I have one more slide here where you can see some resources or references.
Excellent.
If you want to, you see, and there's the Nalanda Institute. They have many programs, but one is contemplative psychotherapy, which includes mindfulness and compassion. And then is also the Buddhist Inquiry, which is the Barre Center near Boston, the Ackerman Institute in New York, which in marriage and family therapy incorporates many of these ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And then is uclahealth.org for the Mindful Awareness Research Center, and Mark Epstein's webpage, which also have some information about especially the psychoanalytical approach and Buddhist psychology.
Mm-hmm. So these are all sites that potentially one could get some of those graphic depictions of the Eightfold Path, the Four Noble Truths, all those other things that you found. Those might be some places to get that. So that's fantastic. So again, those of you who are Floridians, if you're not an AAMFT member, we encourage you to do that. And if you do, and when you do, be sure to join the Florida Interest Network. And even if you're not, we invite you to connect with us on our Facebook page and our website to find out more of what's going on. Andrea, I know you wanted to share something. Go for it.
Which part?
Whatever you want. Well, I'll let you have the last word. How's that?
Oh, just more than anything, our Facebook is really going very well, and it's steadily climbing. More information. If there are other people who have interest, honestly, in doing other town halls, that would be great. So just connect with us.
That's right. That's right. And if not through our Facebook, if you're not on Facebook, and half of the board is not, then there is also our website where Andrea, I know, is posting all the same announcement kind of information is on our website. And what is our website again? www.floridaiNterestNetwork.org. All right.
Yeah,
so
again, the MFT website.
Yep.
Under geographic
interest groups. Yes. And so we encourage you to stay in touch with us because we keep doing this almost every month, Again, Ellie, great to have you, and we look forward to seeing you at one of our future events. And otherwise, everyone, I thank you again for attending. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thank you very much.